Hello, it's Andrew here again, and this is episode 137. And we're picking up the narrative at Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 22. Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Wow. How offendable are you? How ready are you to take offence or to see insult? In this text, Peter comes with a reasonable question. How many times must I forgive before I draw a line? 7 times 7 seems generous, doesn't it? But Jesus pushes back. He says, not 7 times, 70 times 7, or 77 times. There's some uncertainty about the exact number. But what Jesus is pointing to is forgiveness being habitual. It's something that becomes part of who we are. We're not even, in the end, really giving much thought to it. It's just something that we do. I want us to notice that in this passage, if you didn't notice, that there's no mention made of repentance. No mention made of expressions of sorrow or regret. No acknowledgement of having done anything wrong. No seeking of forgiveness. It doesn't figure in the text at all. It's simply about the initiative being put on the person who has been, or has a right, potentially, to be offended. So, what's going on here? It seems to me that Jesus is pointing to the importance of forgiveness to the forgiver. To the one who is invited, is called to be the forgiving one. That forgiveness becomes part of who we are. That it's kind of automatic. It becomes our default setting. It's just something that we do. Because in the end, forgiveness sets both free. The person who does the forgiving and the person who is forgiven. You see, the forgiver is already free. When you're forgiven, you've let go of the right or perhaps the need to feel resentful, to feel bitter, to feel aggrieved, to feel that you're owed something. To forgive allows you to make a fresh start with the other person every time. If forgiveness is habitual, you're probably not even aware that you're extending grace. Because the forgiveness is so complete, you're not thinking about it at all. In the end, it becomes what sort of person you're becoming, I'm becoming. Am I going to be one who keeps score? Who is always looking for insult, for wounds, for occasions to become resentful? Ultimately, this is damaging to one person most. Not me. And it's also spilling over to those around me, those close to me. Are they having to walk around on eggshells with me? Are there no-go areas in the things that we can talk about? Are they in a heightened state of alert when they're in my company, aware that they need to be on guard and choose their words and the things that they do carefully? Let's notice that when I'm like that, it affects all around me. Whether or not others want to be with me. It doesn't make for harmonious, open, free, full and ultimately joyful relationships. It's worth asking ourselves the questions. Do I hang on to hurt? Do I keep going over past wrongs? What happens in my body when I allow myself to remember certain people who have hurt me in the past? Do I habitually cast myself as a victim? Am I a serial or even occasional complainer? Do I regularly point the finger at others? Am I the morality police, the judge? Am I critical? Am I a know-all? See, these are all pointers to a tendency within us to hold on to stuff. And Jesus wants us to be free. The context of this passage from verse 1 through the whole chapter is about reconciliation. It's about restoration. It's about wholeness. It's about the exercise of grace. It's about not keeping score. It's about an openness to forgiving and consequently an openness to receiving forgiveness. As we see in the parable which follows this, which we'll be looking at in our next episode, we cannot receive if we're not willing to give. It's an uncomfortable truth, and it's there. I've come to suspect that if we are habitual forgivers, we're less likely to be in need of forgiveness. We're not going to have those prickly, sharp edges that tend to wound and damage and hurt those around us. We'll be the kind of people that others want to be around. And what we discover in this is a recognition of the grace and the generosity of God. A God who keeps forgiving even when we don't realize we need it. How many times a day do we say and do things that we fail to say or do things that are needful? And God keeps forgiving. And we're not even aware of it. In Romans 2, Paul talks about the issue of judging others. He says like this, it starts at verse 1. You have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge the other, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. Now we have here a classic case in the New Testament describing projection. We project onto others the very things that we ourselves are doing. Now we know that God's judgment, in verse 2, against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere mortal, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment? Or do you show contempt for the riches of his kindness, tolerance and patience, not realizing that God's kindness leads you towards repentance? But because of your stubbornness and your unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath against yourself for the day of God's wrath, when his righteous judgment will be revealed. God will give to each person according to what they've done. Again, verse 4, don't you realize that God's kindness leads you towards repentance? The thing about this whole passage is that what we discover is that we're setting ourselves up for who we're becoming. This is a future. This is a destiny we're choosing for ourselves. If we're continuing to judge, unwilling to forgive, we're becoming the judgmental kind of people who ourselves will find ourselves under judgment because we've not been able to forgive or willing to let go. God is forgiving, 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 and we're barely aware of it. It's God's hope that we become aware, and that this will lead us toward repentance, to a change in how we live, and particularly in how we relate to others. This will lead us into a life-giving, life-affirming, loving way of being. Without living, where living out of a generosity of spirit becomes second nature to us. There's a real challenge here. There's also cause for hope. It's when we start to become aware of the extent of the grace we've received, of the forgiveness that is continually ours, that real change becomes possible. We then have the possibility of becoming forgiving ourselves, of a transformation that brings us increasingly into the likeness of Jesus, that makes us much easier to be with. We started by suggesting that this is about becoming unoffendable, because some of us take offence very easily. It's also, though, about coming to a place where we assume the best of others, that they're doing the best they know how. As it's one of my best friends, who is a retired school counsellor, says he always assumes that people are doing the best they know how, even though to us it might not look to be very good. And I become aware that so often we attribute the most negative intent on others. We put the most negative spin on the actions of others. I was watching a bit of an interview that was years old between Barack Obama and Bill O'Reilly, a Fox News host. And O'Reilly was trying to pin Obama on some actions in his administration that O'Reilly was calling corruption. And Obama says there have been numerous investigations of this particular issue, and there wasn't a whisker, a smidgen of corruption involved. Sure, he said, some of the choices, some of the decisions that were made were boneheaded. They were just plain dumb. But there was no intent at corruption. And I was kind of struck by that. It's so easy, isn't it, to attribute the worst to others, to attribute illegal or the most malevolent intent, when in fact it may be just pure stupidity and just doing dumb things, or they're having a bad day. And so we have Jesus inviting us to forgive, because in the end we all want to receive forgiveness. And just to let things be. God bless you.